Welcome to Ask HC Alumni, Channeling Your Inner Leader, a call focused on finding your inner light in order to lead effectively during this national crisis. We'll take your questions, and alumni experts will help us discover how to tap into our potential in order to weather this crisis. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's call offered exclusively for Holy Cross community members. And it's wonderful to have you here today. Today, I welcome Kelly Meerbott from the class of 1998 and Joe Morgan from the class of 1981. Kelly and Joe both work as advisors to leaders and CEOs, and I'm thrilled to have them joining me in answering your questions today. I encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation by clicking on the Q&A function located on the webinar control panel. And I know that many of you will also have really great advice to share with us. We're not the only experts on the call today. So please contribute your thoughts in the chat. We'll be referencing those throughout the discussion, and we love to hear the comments and advice and suggestions that you have. This presentation is recorded and will be made available on the Alumni Career Development website in a few days, and you'll get an email when that's ready. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's guests. I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to work with Kelly and Joe. Both have a really very genuine, values-driven, very people-focused approach to their work. And I think they're the perfect people to speak to us today about such an important topic about finding that inner leadership, finding that hope during this difficult time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly so we can hear a little bit about her journey up to this point.
Thank you, Maura, and thank you to everybody who's taken the time out of their hectic schedules to come be with us today. I started my career right out of college in 1998, working in corporate for about 11 years. And then I was part of a round of layoffs in 2009, which I actually thought was the worst day of my life, but it ended up being the best day of my life because it launched me into what I was called to do, which is what I'm doing now. As a leadership coach, I help you channel your inner leader and turn up the volume on what's magnificent about you and your organizations. It's that simple.
Wonderful. And Joe, thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Maura. I appreciate very much having the opportunity to be on the call today. So I live in Nashville, Tennessee now. I'm a Worcester kid, though. I grew up there, and as I often call myself, the poster child of higher education in Worcester, having had the pleasure of going to several of the schools, but Holy Cross, of course, is my absolute favorite. And so my background, I was a chemistry major at Holy Cross, and I discovered I didn't like beakers. I love vats and I love scale. So I found this 3-2 program with WPI and became a chemical engineer. And it was really the catalyst for my career. And I had the fortune to move from the back end of companies to the front end, where I was able to innovate and create new things for companies as an entrepreneur. And I did that for several companies for the first decade of my career. And then I guess I got sort of discovered, and I was asked to start a business for Sony in the United States back in the early 90s. And my family moved from Massachusetts to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And that really opened my eyes to what became the rest of my career, which was leadership and the opportunity to help people with people and culture at the center. So then I had the pleasure of being CEO of 7 different companies in different industries and in different types of businesses. And the one thing that I never did was to actually start my own business, which I did about 3 years ago, called SIY, which means Be Safe, Be Inspired, Be You. And from there, I began advising businesses as opposed to just having my own business. I then was able to bring forward philosophy and strategy, et cetera, and I help a lot of companies do that work. And now we're in this crisis mode where we're all digging deep in pulling out whatever resources we have. So thank you, Maura, for giving us this opportunity to talk with the Holy Cross community.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's really wonderful to have you both on the call today. And so what we are really going to be focusing on is thinking about good leadership and thinking about how we can pull these traits out from within us. This is a list that Kelly, Joe, and I put together. It is by no means comprehensive. We know that there are many things that make up a good leader. But some of the first ones that came to mind were honest, humble, informed, compassionate, empathetic, values-driven, trusting and trustworthy, and inspiring. So just to set the stage for you a little bit, this is the type of leadership that we think about and the type of leadership that we're going to be starting from for our conversation. So as we jump in, we first want to say it's okay not to be okay. And this is something, Kelly, I'll pass this over to you because I know this was something that you had some really great insight on, and I credit you for including this in the conversation.
Yeah. So I keep hearing the phrase unprecedented times, and I think that's incorrect because we've never experienced a time like this before, ever. And I see a lot of people, good intentioned people, and I'm not judging them, out there talking about writing the next novel or being the next Iron Human, training and working out every day. And sometimes that's not exactly the most compassionate example we can give to ourselves. For me, sometimes wins are very small. It's a baby step, just getting out of bed could be a win, making sure that your kids are doing their homework or doing the work that they're supposed to do is a win. We were joking yesterday, Maura, Joe and I, that putting pants on, especially in this time of Zoom, is a win.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't have to be this major gargantuan thing, because there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of stressful images that we're seeing. It's death and destruction out there. And if you're feeling stressed out, it's okay if you need to curl up under the covers and watch Netflix for the day. I think it's really important that we are gentle with ourselves right now and not add the pressure of trying to train to climb, I don't know, Mount Kilimanjaro next. I don't think that's a reasonable request, because we have a lot of things that we're balancing, and, emotional intelligence is first do no harm, and that includes to yourself.
Yeah. Joe, any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's we were talking a little bit about this yesterday in preparation for the call. By the way, I just saw a question come in from a former Holy Cross soccer player that was a teammate of mine. So, Kevin, hello. That's pretty cool. I don't know. I think it's interesting. Last week, I had a call with a guy, and I had met him 2 weeks prior to the COVID-19 situation really taking place. And we were planning to do some things from a partnership standpoint, and we will eventually. And this guy, hugely gregarious, wicked smart, awesome. And then I had the call with him, and I turned on Zoom like 8 o'clock in the morning last week, and this guy's face popped up, and I didn't recognize him, honestly.
No.
And he had bags. He had a lot of facial hair. A lot of men are kind of growing their beards and stuff. I had one, but my wife asked me to get rid of it, so I shaved it off yesterday. And I just talked to him, like we didn't talk at all about the partnership. We talked all about what's going on, because something is now behind the mask. Like, you are being a really genuine person with me, and what's going on. And it wasn't anything different than most people are experiencing right now, but it was an opportunity for us to talk about the stuff that we're all facing, as opposed to making it a business meeting. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I know for sure in my experience, and this is probably true of a life thing, is we build relationships through common experience. And there's no more common experience than my life than what's experienced today. I mean, everybody's got their own version of COVID taking place. And if you use it in a non-opportunistic way, but if you use it from the heart and you use it through the values that are mentioned on the previous slide, then I think we have a really good opportunity to take advantage of what the gift is of this situation. So, but yeah, you have ups and downs, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's not easy.
And Maura, do you mind if I dovetail off of what Joe just said? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
first of all, I just want to be real clear that I'm a big fan of Joe's and Maura's, and it's been a gift for me to get to know them the past couple of weeks. But I think one of the things we were talking about yesterday was genuinely checking in with people, just the way Joe experienced. I start off all my emails and conversations with people with this phrase, genuine check-in. How are you doing? How are you holding up? How's your family? How's your work situation? Because what's going to happen is really it's going to build this emotional connection that people are going to remember beyond COVID, and, as somebody who owns her own business, just as Joe does, we're entrepreneurs, we eat what we kill, so there is that kind of urge to kind of pitch, but nobody wants to hear about your product right now. Just hate to tell you. So it's easier to just drop that facade and really focus on that emotional, heart-centered, soul-centered connection, which is something I love about the Holy Cross community that I've really rediscovered over the past couple of weeks through knowing Joe and knowing Maura. It's that soul connection that really pulls us together and connects us to each other. And this is the perfect time to really nurture and massage that, if you will.
Absolutely.
Laura, can I say one thing too? Can we build up together?
Yeah.
Okay. Big surprise that was going to happen, right?
Right.
So the other thing that I think is very true, and sometimes you forget, people were not okay. There were a lot of people not okay before this happened.
Yeah.
Right.
And for example, I live in Nashville. We had a tornado a couple weeks before this.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And I was awakened, and I went in the basement with my stuff, and I sat down there, and I was sitting down there for about 10 minutes, and I realized how serious it was. Now, nothing happened to us, fortunately, but there are people in this community that will not recover from this the way they thought they were going to, because no one can help them because of the situation. And to me, it's heartbreaking.
It is.
The other thing that I just wanted to mention on the list of values that we call leadership values or leadership traits that we called out, it was by accident, but the middle one is empathy. And through this experience, I found, I did the Gallup question when I first became a CEO many years ago, and down near the bottom was empathy. And I thought I was a pretty empathetic person. Sympathy was pretty high, compassion was very high, but empathy was pretty low. And so I asked my wife about it, and she said, yeah, that's about right. And so I thought, wow. And that's about seeing the world as others see it. And that's a hard thing to do. But right now, I think, unlike any other experience I've ever had in my life, we have a view into the world that people live in at home. And so if we don't snoop around and be stupid about it and just take it as an example and maybe be curious about what we see, it might be really useful to help them get out of that not being okay, because you're being respectful and genuinely curious about what they're doing. So anyway, that's something that I never thought of before, but now I have an opportunity to do because it's right there on the screen every day.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And Joe, you're so right about us not being okay before. I read this quote by author Sonia Renee Taylor, and she said, we will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. And the three of us have talked about all. Now, I want to just say that I have extreme empathy and compassion for the people that who are suffering now, who have experienced loss because of this. I'm not saying that, but there are a lot of wonderful things that are happening. One thing is that I think parents are now realizing how hard teachers' jobs are. I mean, I keep hearing that. There's pollution that is clearing up. I just saw a picture of the Himalayas this morning and that they haven't been able to see the mountaintops because of the pollution, and now it's clearing up. I think we're reconnecting, we're slowing down. I saw a relative who posted a picture of her son who was actually outside under a tree in their yard reading, no devices. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for this reset, rejuvenation, rest time, because we haven't had that, and we've glorified the achievement and the pushing, and now it's time to rest for right now, because it's not forever, it's temporary.
Right. Well, and I think that's the perfect segue too into jumping into some of these questions that have come in from people upon registration, and some of the stories that we've heard from our alumni community, and trying to figure out exactly, okay, how can people rest and rejuvenate and really tap into these wonderful traits that we know that everyone has within them. And so the first case study that we'll talk about is claiming your inner leader. And someone writes, "Dear HC alumni, throughout my whole life, there has been a focus on the importance of developing leadership skills. Whether it was within school, after school activities, or with friends, I was always told to be a leader and not a follower. As this crisis continues to consume our lives, I feel pulled to do something to make a difference. I feel pulled to put my leadership skills to the test. At the same time, I feel overwhelmed and paralyzed. What does leadership even look like during an international pandemic? And I know I have leadership qualities, but have a hard time expressing them. Any suggestions?"
Joey, do you want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
You got to go first time, so.
Go ahead.
We're not competing here, though.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No, I'll be happy to do that. So I think, the topic of leadership is heavy to begin with. I think, it immediately puts stress on people to kind of be out in front and, and figure all this out. And so I think the first thing is to be genuine, and whatever that means to you. And genuine can be really simple things, because today, sometimes it's active participation is as important as being the person that's kind of in the front, So I've run a lot of manufacturing companies, and the average person in my company is check to check, and it's not an easy thing. And I worry about how they feel right now, and the stress that comes from that. And what I've found over time is that as leaders, as people of influence, and that's an important word too, people look up to you for guidance, we can do many very simple things that would help them get through this. And it's being genuinely curious. It's asking questions that you care about the answers to, more than just, the typical thing. It's knowing a little bit about them and being genuinely curious that can be really beneficial. And, the businesses that I'm helping run right now, we went through the first phase where we were just creating order. Here's what we need to do. Move home, have your computer, get settled, all that stuff. Then we moved into the next phase. Oh my God, this might actually last a little longer than we hoped. Customers are changing. Cash is becoming really important. We're going to file, the government's reacting. We're going to do all those things. And then the third phase is, seems like maybe there's a little bit of good news here, but can we wait? Can we make it long enough? And if we can, great. If we can't, we're going to have to do some tough things like furloughs and all of those types of things. So from a pure business standpoint, I think it's putting structure, making sure the foundation's really strong. Don't abandon everything that you've done up until this point. The assumptions have changed. That's all. The plan still counts. It's just the assumptions have changed. And I think it's important for people to know that everything they've done up until this moment hasn't been fully abandoned. And then the other thing that I would say is there's some stuff you can do if you do feel paralyzed and you do feel overwhelmed, which if you don't, I would love to do a gene analysis as to what makes you up, because I think it's impossible not to feel that way at some point. I think it's little stuff like my sister passed away last November, and it just like really, excuse me, it was October. It really kicked me in the gut, and I didn't react very well or recover very well from that. But what I did do, and I continued to do, was to talk to people in my life that I maybe hadn't connected with in a while. And I've been doing this regularly, but it gave me some really strength about the story of my life will continue, even though this moment feels totally overwhelming. Mm. There will be another chapter. And I think there's some things like that each of us can do. Call someone that you haven't talked to in a really, really long time. Mm. And you know what's going to happen? It's going to give them hope. It's not going to remove the reality, but it's going to give them hope. So things like that.
Mm. Right. Because even just having, I mean, you need to have the strength in order to be a leader. And I think, I love that, because I think that hope and strength helps to give you that energy to then tap into what makes you kind of that genuine leader. Kelly, mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
So baby steps create forward momentum. So, you know, what looks like leadership from Joe and I may not look like that for you in your life. And if you're feeling paralyzed and overwhelmed, first of all, give yourself permission to stay in that space. Number one, that's what I would say. And just know that the number one thing that people are afraid of in their lives is feeling their feelings, which is why a lot of these things that are going on around us in this chaotic fashion are bringing up wounds that maybe we thought were healed, but really aren't. In terms of what can you do, you have to see what aligns with you. For instance, you know, if you want to reach out to somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, I'm the type of person that will scroll through her phone and go, oh, I haven't talked to Maura in a while. I'll just do it, you know, but that's me. That may not work for you. So one of the things I may suggest is let's do something that's a little more gentle. I think something that would give people hope is receiving letters via snail mail. So, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while, been thinking about you. How are you doing? How are you holding up? Would love to chat, and then put your contact information in there. That might be a better baby step for you. The other gut instinct I was thinking is turning up the self-care. You know, when I was feeling out of control a couple of weeks ago, because I'm in Philadelphia, so we've been quarantined since the 16th, part of my self-care plan is always talking to my psychiatrist. I'm somebody who's a giver. You know, and I know part of being the best leader I can be is taking care of my mental health. And we had cut back to once a month. Now we're doing every other week phone calls, because I knew I needed his support. Being really diligent with your diet and watching what you're consuming here, and here. You know, I would say go away from any of the news outlets and understand that nobody, including the doctors, knows what's going on. Nobody. What I have done in my life, and that's really the space I coach from, is I never ask my clients to do anything I won't do myself. I used to check the CDC website in the morning and at night to see if there were any new regulations. I read the Skim to make sure that I'm informed. And I listen to Tony Fauci. You know, those are where I get my information, period. I've since stopped looking at the CDC website. I now look at Johns Hopkins, because for one simple reason, they have a tracking map that shows the amount of people that have recovered. You know, that's something that we're not talking about, the recovery. So, you know, I would say that, and then practice gratitude, you know, and it doesn't have to be some major thing. It could be, you know, I'm grateful that I have electricity to be on Zoom with Maura and Joe. I'm grateful that I opened my eyes this morning. You know, those very simple things, pay attention to that. And like I said, if you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed, don't beat yourself up. You know, sit there and feel it, and really interview those feelings. Like, why am I feeling that way? What's triggering it? What's really underneath it? What's the underlying belief that's anchoring me in that feeling of overwhelm and paralysis? And, you know, look at it. But the last thing you want to do is add anger, frustration, or you know, judgment on top of it, because all that's doing is creating more friction and more stress. And we don't need that right now. If you need that, turn on the TV and look at the news. I mean, you know, and that's not a judgment. It's just
Right.
that, you know, that's the media's job. And I will tell you, I worked in media, and my first conversation with the news director when I came out of Holy Cross was this. He sat me down in his office and he said, "You have two rules of local news, Kelly. One, if it bleeds, it leads," meaning if the subject of the story is bleeding in any way, it's the first story on the news break. And the second one is, we need to scare our audience enough for them to stay with us from 5 o'clock to 5:30 to 6:30. It's their job to scare you. So, you know, and again, I had a great career, but it's not exactly a clear view of what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, one of the things we talked about, which just leads really well into the next case study we're looking at, is the fact that one of the most difficult things for people right now is that one of their ways of tackling the feeling of being overwhelmed is to gather, to be with people, to volunteer, to try and make a difference. And in a lot of ways, that's taken away from us. So let me jump into this case study and we can talk about it. And Kelly, you'll get to lead off this one since Joe led off the last one. But this one's on micro leadership. So, dear HC alumni, I live in an area that has been on lockdown for the past 3 weeks. Every day, new guidelines and restrictions are put into place to promote social distancing. I follow the news and am amazed by the acts of courage by the first responders and community leaders. They give me hope and inspire me to do my part to live the HC mission and help others. Can I really make a difference? I'm no Tony Fauci. And can you focus your energies on how can you focus your energies on small problems that you can address? You know, those baby steps that you mentioned, Kelly.
Yeah. So what came to me was, there's a quote by Rumi, and he says, "Yesterday I was clever. I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise. I want to change myself." So first of all, none of us are Tony Fauci, although I want to give him a big hug right now. I'm a huge hugger, and that's probably my biggest challenge right now. But, you know, I'm also a helper, you know, and one of the questions I was asking myself a couple weeks ago is, what do I have to contribute? How can I contribute best right now? And my unique gift and talent is listening and asking questions. So one of the things I decided to do was volunteer on a hotline to help work people through a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. The other thing that came up was adopting a grandparent. And my grandparents, my last grandmother passed January 1st, 2016. And I come from an Italian-American family. She was the matriarch. I did not react well, just like Joe was talking about with his sister. I miss her terribly. So when this idea of adopting a grandparent in another country in an assisted living facility came, and all it required me to do was to connect via Zoom, I jumped on it. I have a very good friend who fortunately, thank God, saw ahead of the curve and ordered CDC compliant masks that her sister was making for my husband and I. My husband now works at Whole Foods, and he's on the front line. And it's funny because he said to me, I was on the front lines protecting men, women, and children for 20 years in the Navy, and now I'm on the front lines again protecting men, women, and children for the grocery. So basically what she did, my friend, I forget what her sister's name is. I think it's Chelsea. She was talented at sewing. So instead of doing these doggy bandana scarves, they switched, pivoted, and did something new with something old and created CDC compliant masks. So I would say, number one, ask yourself, how can I contribute best right now?
Yeah.
What are my unique gifts and talents that can give over? And just remember, baby steps. So baby steps create forward momentum, but they also create a ripple effect. So if you're shifting inside of yourself, that's going to change the world around you. And yes, small energies on small problems are going to create a large impact. So.
And Kelly, before we turn things over to Joe, a question came in. How did you find out about the Adopt a Grandparent program?
So the corporation that I worked for, the media conglomerate I worked for prior to becoming a coach in 2009 was Clear Channel. And they're now iHeartMedia. I worked for them on a national level. And I was listening to Elvis Duran, and they started talking about Adopt a Grandparent. And I just Googled it. And actually, several of my friends and colleagues work in assisted living, and I've passed along that idea to them as well. And actually, Joe had a great story that he told us yesterday that I'll allow him, I'll just let him tell you himself about a small, baby step that he did that created a huge ripple effect as well.
Perfect. Joe, I'll let you take that lead in.
Okay. Well, I think in big letters, can I really make a difference? Yes, everyone can. I think by virtue of being a part of this call, you're making a difference because we're creating a community. I mean, you're helping me by being on this call because I know you're out there, and I get the chance to speak with Kelly and more. So that, I mean, it's really, I think it's quite important. There's kind of three things that I would do, and it's not because of COVID. It's just kind of what I've done in mentoring experiences in my past. I think it's the first thing you do is an inventory of your most important things in your life. When you start to do it, you write them down, like what it makes you smile. That helps to create the foundation. Some would say you can counter that with the things that cause you to frown and just stay clear of those because you don't need any more of them. But I think just write down, create your own personal inventory. The other thing that I would do is the next step is what do you think your treasure is? Like Kelly described the ability to listen, and I can tell you, I've known Kelly now for 2 weeks, and she's extraordinary at that. But what she brings back after the listening is actually better than the listening itself, because she demonstrates it. And I'm not just saying that, that's actually true. And so I think being very, very genuine and clear about your treasure matters, and everybody's treasure is just a little bit different. An example of that, when you watch the video, if you don't have Crazy Socks, 1982 grad of Holy Cross, his son created the business. He and his son created Crazy Socks, and I buy my socks. I have a sock that's my logo that I bought from Crazy Socks. And John, the son, sends videos out every day. And when I see the pure joy that he has at this time, it makes me proud to be a customer, and I'm also proud to be a Holy Cross grad, et cetera, et cetera. It just makes me so happy. But it's his treasure. His treasure is this purity of joy that he brings to everyone. So that's another one. And so the third one is, now what do you do with that? So you know all the things that make you happy, and then you know what your treasure is. Point it to something and have the courage to go out and do something about it. But here's the thing that I've learned over time is sometimes we almost self-prescribe how to best apply it, and we're wrong. And what we can't do is get disappointed if someone says, you know what, that's not exactly helpful to us, but what about this? And be willing to adjust, and it's okay. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about us, it's about helping someone. So an example of that, I sit on the board of an assisted living organization that's based in Nashville. It's owned by the Archdiocese of Nashville, which is quite interesting. And the director is a great guy, he's become a friend, is so committed to the elderly, which is a passion of mine. And he goes to work every day with the frontline workers because he just feels that's his responsibility. And so I was on a bike ride with my wife this weekend, and we drove by there and kind of drove around. It was kind of sad. There's only one person outside, a retired priest who I've seen before. He's reading a book, but everybody else is in lockdown. And there's a few other people that had just come back from the other place with groceries. And I don't know, it just struck me that an idea would be, what if I just social distance, and there's a Panera right next door. And I said, how about if I just drive by and get a coffee? And how about, David, you and I stand across from each other? We can just talk. Because I can tell he's just, the weight of the world is on his shoulders. And when I called him, he didn't perfectly like that idea, but he twisted it a little bit. And we're going to get together next week in the parking lot. And then I also mentioned to him, we see all the workers in New York with the fire organization cheering on the nurses and docs as they're leaving. No one's doing that for them, and they probably won't because they're a small organization. And I said, what if the board did that? What if the board all came up and we gave them our own round of applause? Because that's going to mean something to them, I think. And so a version of that is going to happen. Some breakfast is going to occur in the parking lot for them in a safe way. And we'll have some coffee. Selfishly, I want to know they're okay too.
Yeah.
It means something to them, but I want to know they're okay, because what they're doing for the elderly right now, I feel so sad for them, because they're alone to begin with many times. Yeah. And now they can't see anybody. And I think that's quite devastating. So I think that's how I've chosen to focus some of my own personal energy, and everyone's got their own way of doing it. And no one's wrong. Everyone's right.
Yeah. I love that story, Joe. And, you're just one of life's gifts, honestly. I mean, really. And, to Joe's point, my husband, who works at Whole Foods, offered out on Facebook, anybody who's high risk and you need your groceries purchased, I'll buy them for you. You can transfer me the money and I'll bring them to you. And where I live in Narberth, there's another group. I mean, I saw a woman post and she said, I'm in high risk. I'm scared to go out to the grocery store, and I have to go to these 3 places. And there were about 10 people who responded to her and said, where do you live? What do you need? I'd be happy to do it for you. So I think everybody is really feeling, especially if you're not a healthcare worker, you're not on the front lines and you want to do something to help. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like, it was Joe's beautiful idea to have coffee with this gentleman standing a stake. That's not a huge thing. Like, he didn't, run a huge GoFundMe campaign. You don't have to do that. You could write a letter. You could buy somebody's groceries. You could, I don't know, pick up somebody's yard, do something that you're able to do. It could be a small baby step that makes the biggest ripple effect. Yeah. So I love these little things that are happening where people are really, giving selflessly of themselves, because I think we lost ourselves for a long time. And this is not a health issue. It's a humanity issue. That's what it is, and until all of us are free of this virus, none of us are free. So do what you can do in your own small way, because it's gonna make an impact.
Sorry, Maura, go ahead.
Oh no, it's cute. It made me think our neighborhood has a Facebook group too, and for a lot of kids, particularly kids who are in elementary school or preschool who have birthdays during this time and don't get to have birthday parties, there have been, in my town's relatively small, and so there have been all sorts of posts about doing car caravans where people drive by and honk and shout happy birthday to whoever's birthday it is. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, Kelly and Joe. I mean, it's getting at the heart of humanity again, and it's treating one another like real people. It's seeing each other as real people, and really, I mean, almost going back, 100 years or so to that sense of community again, and which is also what makes us love Holy Cross so much, is that sense of community and really knowing one another.
Yep.
Maura, last week was my birthday. April 2nd was my birthday. And one of my best friends is down in DC. The other one's in Conshohocken, which is about 15 minutes from here. And my husband was going to work at 5:30 in the morning. And he said, wake up, somebody left something on the lawn for you. And I was like, what? So running out in my pajamas, and it's a flock of plastic flamingos with an A-frame sign and big letters that said happy birthday. And the A-frame sign said, flocks of love on your birthday, love Marcy and Kelly and Lexi. And I was like, oh my God. And I've been telling everybody about it because especially if you have little ones that don't understand this, or if you're, celebrating a graduation or a birthday or a prom, this is a safe social distancing way to do it. And I think, I know my friend in Oregon who I texted the picture to, she's like, I looked all over and they don't have this. This is a great business idea. I think we're going to. So she's like, thank you. But, for all of you parents out there, or those of you that are missing milestones, there's something called lawn signs or lawn signage. And anybody who wants to see the picture, I'll send it to you. But it was just such a nice way of being remembered. And knowing that my friends loved me enough to do that, and it stayed up all day and it was great. I loved it.
That's fantastic. That is a great idea. And Joe, I know I cut you off.
No, there's just a lot of things flowing through my head. One thing that is something that we focus our energy on, in the class of 81, we have a bunch of friends that graduated together and married someone in the class. And we were all planning a trip to go to Portugal together on a bike trip. And we don't know yet, but it's not looking great, but that's okay. What's happened though, is we're talking, I would bet the whole group hasn't talked maybe since we graduated, but now we have done that a couple times and we'll continue to do that. So even with this situation, it has created an opportunity for us to stay closer. And I think from that, you create energy that's positive from the situation. One other little thing that I was going to throw out there too is that we all have our own favorite restaurant, I'm sure, that we go to, or somebody that works at the deli or whatever. And this is a really good time for us to do the unexpected and, tip as if you bought the whole meal, not just takeout, stuff like that. It's a little thing, but $10 or $15 may not mean anything to you, but it may mean a very, very big thing to someone that's lost their entire livelihood. So things like that become, I think, little areas where we can do something special and, help people a bit.
Joe, that's such a great point because there are so many people in the service industry that are out of work. And, something that Narberth is doing is where I live is, a lot of the businesses are selling gift cards that you can use later, or they have a virtual tip jar. I would also say shop as local as you can, buy local beer, buy from local distilleries, do all of that as much as possible. This is the community that you live in that's going to be around long before this virus, after this virus blows through. And, the other thing you could do is don't forget people who cut your hair. Ladies, we all cut in color. We know that. Maybe you buy a gift card that's going to cover 2 or 3, or, you tip like Joe said on, the entire thing, not just what you're spending now. But yeah, those are really small little things that you can do.
Right. Yeah. And that can make just such a big difference. And I think, the third case study that we'll focus on before we jump into the questions that all of you have and that have come up during our conversation is just the importance of leading with compassion, which I think really comes into what you just talked about. And I'll read through this and then we can take it from this angle. Dear HC alumni, I'm a parent of 2 children, a college freshman and a high school sophomore. My partner and I are both grateful to still have jobs and be able to work from home. My 2 children started distance learning 2 weeks ago. This situation has been extremely difficult. First, it was the stress of getting my college student home, coupled with the incredible sense of loss from both children. My college student missing her freshman spring and my high school student missing her softball season. This was the stress of then it was the stress of figuring out how everyone would work and learn from the same household. Now it's the stress of not driving each other crazy. How can I lead by example and show compassion when I barely have the energy to tackle everything that I have to do in one day? How can I stay strong for others when I feel like I'm falling apart? And Joe, you'll get to lead off this last case study.
Okay, great. I think the word simplicity comes to mind for me, is that really keeping things incredibly simple, and don't overdo it. And the other thing that's nice is with video, you can shut the video off if you're not ready for that. That's okay. It's okay to do that. And I don't think we should, as leaders, comment on that either. If someone's on mute, or if someone's shuts the video off, don't call it out. I mean, that's embarrassing, and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I also think that if we do have a view into someone's world as leaders, this is a little bit of a different answer to the question, and we see something going on in the circumstance, kids screaming, something happening in the background that feels a little stressful, you can mention to someone it's okay if they don't participate, and or get back to them later, or I just don't think you want to call it out, because I think that makes it a bit challenging. In terms of when it's you as the top person or a leader in a situation that's feeling all these things yourself, one of the things that I have found in this situation is sometimes people begin to drift into areas where they really don't know what they're talking about, but they feel like they have to be the expert. Don't do that. Don't try and become an expert about something that you're reading the same stuff everyone else does. So instead of becoming the expert, just default to maybe the structure of what the communication is, and help people know that it's going to be okay. Because the reality is, most of the information that comes into us during any crisis is wrong. It's not right. It's just not wrong. The truth will emerge, but it will likely emerge in retrospect. So we can't buy into all these things, because I think it just builds up, right? And the reality, I was thinking about this metaphorically the other day, is the bottom line is, I don't know what seat you guys sat in when you went to a class that had a lot of seats in it. I don't know if you were a back row person or a front row person, or when you go to the movie theater, you're a front row person or a back row person. We're all in the front row right now. We are all sitting in the front row of history. And so it is in lightning color, and it's bold, and it's right in front of us, and you can't deny it, and you can't escape it. And so it is overwhelming. The bright lights are on us almost minute by minute. There's not a conversation you can have that won't eventually get to this situation. And how many times has that ever happened in our lives? Probably not many. And so I think it's really about simplicity. Don't over position yourself as an expert, because I think it's wicked stressful. Recognize that we're all kind of sitting here together, and it's hard. And I think be more inquisitive than maybe you've ever been in your life, if that's possible for you. And it's okay. We have to kind of adapt. And if you think about all these smart people like Dr. Fauci and others, they've gotten it wrong a couple times too. And they have a hell of a lot more data than we do.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because it's one of the most complicated circumstances that anyone could ever get involved in scientifically. And there are more variables. Anybody that's done experimental design, you always like to keep variables closed or held while you're trying to figure out the root cause. There are way too many variables, but it's getting better. That's the good thing. It's getting better.
Yeah.
So those are just my thoughts.
Oh my gosh. Joe, that was so great. And I mean, to dovetail off of what you said, don't be an expert. One of the functions of our ego, and we have 41 distinctions of the ego, everybody has it, right, is the I know mind. It's the know-it-all, right? Well, what happens have you ever been around somebody who's like, you'll give them a suggestion, oh, I know. Well, what happens is you're constricting, right? You're constricting all the possibilities instead of saying, here's what I know and here's what I don't know. That opens up all the possibilities and gives it a little bit more of a relaxed nature to kind of flow through. When the question that came through on the case study, how do I lead by example and show compassion when I barely have the energy to tackle everything that I do in one day? Start by having compassion with yourself and being gentle. I would say turn up the volume on your self-care. Make your bathroom a spa experience. Instead of going in and just doing a quick shower, maybe doing a 20-minute bath with a meditation. In terms of staying strong with others and falling apart, fall apart. This is the time to do it. Because first of all, everybody is grieving a loss from, your high school freshman who's missing her softball season to your college student who's now home. And, that's grief. And they're going to go through the 5 stages of grief. And, I talked to one of the sales teams that I help coach, and a guy who he and his fiance have been planning their wedding for 3 years. They had to postpone it. That's grief, that's loss, and that's the more you avoid it and the more you tamp it down, the more it's going to come up and ask you to pay attention to it. So the better thing to do is really go, I'm stressed out. I don't know what the hell's going on from one day to another. I know and I recognize these feelings. It's temporary. It's going to pass, instead of going, nope, I'm going to be the strong one. Just like rub some dirt on it, kid. That does not work. It doesn't. And I was talking to Maura and Joe yesterday about this, that the incidences of PTSD are just rampant right now. I've been talking to Stephen Klasko, who's the president and CEO of Jefferson Healthcare Systems here in Philadelphia. And our conversations usually go like this: how are you doing? How are you holding up? What can I do for your team? What are you hearing right now? And his response is, nothing, let us get through this. We're going to need you after, because the PTSD is real. So that's to say all of us are experiencing trauma. So you need to fall apart. It's okay. And then the other thing is the number of calls to the domestic violence hotlines. If you are one of those people that is experiencing that, find a mental health professional, figure out how you and your loved ones can stay safe. If you need to fall apart, if you need to rage, do it. Lean into those feelings. Don't push them down, because all that's going to happen is whatever you resist persists, right? I was thinking about that before we got on the call. All these people that are, in denial that this is not a real thing and keep going out, the more you resist it, the more COVID is spreading. Yeah. So stop resisting it. Lean into it.
Well, and I think, what's so nice too is one of the things that we had really wanted to make sure that we talked about were some of the small wins. Yeah. Because there are, we all are having these moments of falling apart. I was telling Kelly and Joe, a tree fell in my backyard this morning. So lots of things fell all the way across my neighbor's yard on their trampoline and their swing set. And for me, the small win is that it was raining outside. And so none of their children were outside, because it fell exactly where my neighbor's children normally play. So I think, for all of us, the small wins are really going to change day to day. But this is where we really wanted to use the chat to hear from all of you and to have you type in, to all panelists and attendees, what are you proud of? What are some of your tell me I'm great moments? I accomplished this for the first time in years. What's gone well today? Joe and Kelly, what are your small wins for today?
Being here and being present with all of you. That's a win for me. And being able to share from my heart and soul what I know will help you.
Yep.
Thank you.
A little one for me is I go out for a walk every morning around this park, and a friend of mine owns a brewery in Tennessee. Pure entrepreneur. I mean, awesome guy. So we talk a couple times a day, and I kind of help him a little bit. And I saw him running, and we bantered, not close together, but we bantered back and forth. And I haven't seen him in 5 days. And to me, I don't know if it's in the category of win, but I just felt great to see him. He was exercising and he was healthy and he still had a sense of humor. And that made me feel good, and I just felt like, wow, that's cool. On our path now, they spray painted 6 feet apart, which I think is, and think about that. I mean, 6 feet when I was a kid was 6 feet under, like that was where you were buried. Now it's distance above ground, which I think is kind of funny in itself. But that's a little thing, trying to laugh a little bit.
Right. Yes. Well, and now, I mean, we want to open up questions
Sure.
for all of you. I know we only have a few minutes left. One question that came in a little while ago for you, Joe, they were asking about how you reach out to people you haven't spoken to in a while. And Kelly, it sounds like you're doing a lot of this too right now. Even what the way you were doing it before COVID, and maybe how things have changed now in the way that you're reaching out to people.
Yeah, what I did last year is I decided to reach out to I made a list of people throughout the decades of my life that had influenced me. I just made a list. And then I began calling them. And some of them I hadn't talked to in 30 years. And, when you do that, you're not really sure what the reaction will be, because it could be, the reason we haven't talked in 30 years is because I didn't want to talk to you. But I found in many cases, it was rewarded with just really interesting discussion. There wasn't an expectation built that we're going to stay in touch for the rest of our lives, but it was really an interesting touch point. So that's one thing that I've been pretty consistent on doing. And then the other thing that I did is I was doing a digital cleanup. I was cleaning up all these old documents, and I found all these conversations that I had had with people that either maybe things didn't quite turn out like we'd hoped. And I just began sending them emails with no business expectation. It was just, hey, at that time, it was a really great conversation. It could have been 3 years ago. Now everything's changed. I just hope that you and your family are safe and staying healthy. And I really wish you the best on the other side. And it's been really, what's been really interesting about that is it is from the heart for me. It's very genuine. And the responses, what I found really interesting is what was once a big guard, because it's all about business, has now been dropped, and it's all about humanity. And it turns out these are pretty cool people, but they weren't cool in the business thing because it was a negotiation. And now it's all, hey, my kids are doing great. I didn't know that stuff. They never brought it up when we were in a business conversation. So that's a couple things I do. So
well, and Kelly, I know you have a very effective way of reaching out to people too. It certainly worked when you reached out to me for the time.
Yeah. So I really I think their branding needs to be shifted a little bit, because the name of the company is called Bomb Bomb. But it's video emails. And, I've just really been taking those questions that I talked to you earlier about the genuine check-in, like, how are you doing? How are you holding up? How's your family? How's your job situation? And I think Joe's exactly right. I think one of the things that's happening right now is a reckoning, and we are dropping that facade, and emotional intelligence, empathy, and compassion are going to be more important than ever in the business world and in the world, period. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm not as organized as Joe. I didn't write a list, but what I'll do is I'll scroll through my phone, and if somebody's name pops in and it just kind of hits me intuitively, then I'll call them. Like, I have a friend right now, Sonia, and she and her husband sold their house 3 years ago and have been traveling in an RV all around the United States. She had to stop in Phoenix because of COVID, but, I was scrolling through my phone last night and I saw her name, and I hadn't talked to her in a couple of weeks. And prior to that, I hadn't talked to her in years, and I, just FaceTimed her. Unfortunately, she was cooking dinner at the time, but, that's really what I do. And I try to act from my gut, my intuition, my heart, and my soul, and less from the ego mind, because right now, like Joe said, we don't know. Nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody does. So get out of your head, get into your heart, get into your soul, use your compassion for yourself first. Because if you can't be compassionate with yourself, how are you going to possibly be compassionate with others? And just reach out. I think that story with the gentleman who was running in Joe's neighborhood, I mean, I'm friendly with a lot of the people that Brian works with, my husband works with at Whole Foods, and I keep doing this long distance hug, things like that. Or, saying to people, like I called my mom the other day and I said, I was thinking to myself that I've never told you that some of the best qualities in me came from you. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. And, that means a lot. And I'm grateful that my parents are still alive and they're healthy. And, I'm able to talk to them, so simple things like that. Start saying the things that you were afraid to say, because what's going to happen? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You find out that they're a really nice person outside of a business experience. That's a win to me. I think it's, for me, and I don't know if Maura and Joe feel like this, but the more they tell us social distance, the more I want to pull people I love closer to me. Yep. So we can do that. We can do that by saying those things that are truly in our hearts. Mm-hmm. Now I would caution you, I wouldn't, do things that may be detrimental to you or to your, to the person you're talking to, like, uncovering a lie you may have told 20 years ago. I don't know. This is now is not the time for that. But cultivating genuine, authentic, connected, deep relationships is really what we need to focus on right now, because let's be honest, we're nobody without each other. And this virus started by one person, and now there are 1 million cases, which tells me we're more connected than we ever were.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, well said. And before I wrap it up, because I know we've reached time, any last parting thoughts from you, Joe?
I just think that it's maybe coming out of this, call somebody that you didn't expect to call this week, and just make each other feel good. And then I think listen intently to the safety message that you're receiving, so that on the other side of this, we're all able to enjoy our time together. And it's going to be okay. We are going to be okay. We just don't know exactly what that new form will be. But as I said to a couple of kids last night, Holy Cross students on a call where I was doing some entrepreneurial work, I believe that the experience that this young generation has will help me, as I'm at the last 20% of my life, have confidence that we will all be okay, because the experience that they're having now will form their leadership skills and qualities going forward.
Yes, very well said. Kelly, any parting thoughts?
Just again, be gentle with yourself. Be real gentle with yourself. You can't make a mistake, and if you do, apologize for it and move on, because we don't want to add any more mental tension or stress. This is not the time for that. It's really time to reset, rest, rejuvenate, use the extra free time that you have, because I didn't have all this free time before, but be gentle with yourself, with others, practice compassion.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And thank you both so much. This is really, I had said this to them and it's true. This has been the highlight of my week and the high point of my week. And so thank you all for joining us, for making this a reality. We couldn't do it without all of you listening. If you're interested in following up with Joe or Kelly, you can find both of them on LinkedIn. You can also email me in the alumni office. My email is msweeney@holycross.edu, and I'll be happy to put you in touch. The recording of this presentation, as I mentioned at the beginning, will be available usually sometime within the next few days, or with the Easter holiday, probably next week. And you'll receive an email from me when that's posted. I also encourage you to fill out the survey that you'll see at the end of this, and you'll also see in a follow-up email. I really, really survive on feedback. So please share me your thoughts. It's how I keep changing and iterating and bringing out new programs like this. So I value your feedback very, very much. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach me in the alumni office, again, through my email. And I hope you'll join me for the next one of these calls next month at the beginning of May. We'll have Joan Hogan-Gilman from the class of 1985 and Mark Nevins from the class of 1986. And they'll be talking more specifically about leadership from kind of the C-suite in times of crisis. So we'll get to have leadership part 2 in May. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maura.
I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. And Kelly and Joe, this has just been a real, real pleasure.
Thank you both. Thank you,
Thank you so
Maura.
much.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Maura. God bless.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Thanks, you too.